I was still holding the steering wheel when he texted me that he'd thrown my life away. "Your things are in the trash. Go live with your mother." I didn't answer. I didn't call. I just pulled over on the side of County Road 12 right past the old feed store that had been there longer than I'd been alive. My hands stayed on the wheel a second too long, like if I let go something else would slip with them. Next to me, Mr. Halpern, the notary who had handled my grandfather's affairs for years, shifted in his seat and glanced over. "Why are you crying?" he asked, calm as if we were discussing the weather. "This is good." I turned to him, not sure I'd heard right. He paused, then said it plainly. "You're the richest woman in this city now." The road ahead blurred, not because I was crying, though I was, but because nothing in my life made sense anymore. Just an hour earlier, I had been standing beside my grandfather's casket, shaking hands with people who had known him longer than I had. Men in pressed shirts and women with quiet voices, all saying the same thing. "He was a good man. He was proud of you." I had nodded politely the way you do at funerals. You accept their words even if you're not sure you deserve them. My grandfather had been the one steady thing in my life. He never raised his voice, never rushed you when you spoke. If you asked him a question, he'd think before answering, sometimes too long. But when he did speak, it mattered. And now he was gone. I'd expected the ride back to be quiet. I hadn't expected my marriage to end before I made it home. I looked down at my phone again. The message was still there. No follow-up, no explanation, just a clean final line. "Your things are in the trash." We had been married 12 years. 12 years reduced to one sentence. "I don't understand," I said finally, my voice rough. Mr. Halpern didn't rush to fill the silence. That was something I'd always noticed about him. He let people catch up to their own thoughts. "You don't understand which part?" he asked. "All of it," I said. "My husband just threw me out of my house. And you're telling me that's good." He folded his hands over the leather folder resting on his lap. It looked old, like everything else about him, worn but not weak. "Your grandfather didn't trust your husband," he said. I let out a short breath. He never said that to me. "He wouldn't," Mr. Halpern replied. "He didn't want to put you in the middle, but he planned for it." That word caught me off guard. "Planned." He nodded once. "Yes, planned." We sat there for a moment, the car idling softly. A truck passed by, its tires humming against the pavement. Life went on as if nothing had shifted. But everything had. "Your grandfather came to see me 3 years ago," Mr. Halpern said. "He asked me to draw up a revised will, not a simple one, a careful one." I swallowed. "Why?" "Because he believed," he said slowly, "that one day you might be left with nothing." The words settled in my chest, heavier than I expected. "That's not fair," I said quietly. "He didn't even know my husband that well." Mr. Halpern gave me a look not unkind but steady. "He knew people," he said, "better than most." I looked back out at the road. The feed store sign swayed slightly in the wind. It hadn't been repainted in years, but it was still standing. My grandfather used to take me there when I was a kid, said a place that lasts tells you something about how it's run. I wondered what he would say now. "What does any of this have to do with me being rich?" I asked, the word feeling strange in my mouth. Mr. Halpern tapped the folder lightly. "This," he said. I stared at it like it might explain itself. "Your grandfather's estate is substantial," he continued. "Land investments, business interests, more than most people in this town realize." I shook my head. "He lived in the same house for 40 years. He drove that old truck." "Exactly," Mr. Halpern said. "He didn't spend much. He built quietly." That sounded like him. Still, I couldn't connect it. "And it all goes to me?" I asked. "Yes," he said. I waited for him to add something else, a condition, a complication, something that would make it make sense. He did. "But not all at once," he said. I felt my grip tighten on the wheel again. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, choosing his words carefully, "that your grandfather didn't want to hand you something that could be taken from you." A cold feeling settled in. "Taken by who?" He didn't answer right away. He didn't have to. I thought about my husband Mark standing in our kitchen that morning before the funeral. He hadn't come with me. Said he had work. He always had work lately. "Don't be late," he had told me. "We need to talk when you get back." I had nodded, distracted, thinking about the day ahead, about saying goodbye to my grandfather. I hadn't asked what he wanted to talk about. Maybe I hadn't wanted to know. "He's been under pressure," I said, more to myself than to Mr. Halpern. "Mark. His business hasn't been doing well. He's been stressed. That may be true, Mr. Halpern said evenly, but your grandfather's concern wasn't about stress. Then what was it about? He looked at me for a long moment. Control, he said. The word hung there. I thought about the bank accounts I didn't check anymore because Mark handled them. The bills I didn't see. The way he'd started making decisions without asking, then explaining them after the fact like it was simpler that way. I had told myself it was partnership. That's what you do in a marriage, I thought. You trust. I never signed anything I said, suddenly the thought rising sharp and fast, not without reading it. Mr. Halpern gave a small nod. And that, he said, is exactly why your grandfather's plan still stands. I turned to him. What plan? He opened the folder. Inside were documents neatly arranged, each one marked and tabbed. This is the trust your grandfather created, he said, and the condition attached to it. My heart began to beat a little faster. What condition? He met my eyes. That it would only become fully active, he said, if you were ever put in a position where you had nothing left. I let out a slow breath. Nothing left, I repeated. Yes. I looked down at my phone again, at the message. Your things are in the trash. It didn't feel like anger anymore, or even sadness. It felt like something else. Something quieter. So you're telling me, I said, my voice steadier now, that because my husband just threw me out, I get everything? Mr. Halpern closed the folder gently. I'm telling you, he said, that your grandfather made sure you would never truly be left with nothing. I sat there letting that sink in. The wind picked up outside, rustling the dry grass along the roadside. For the first time since I'd read that message, I wasn't thinking about going home. I wasn't even sure I had one anymore. What do I do now? I asked. Mr. Halpern looked straight ahead, then back at me. Now, he said, you decide what your life looks like without asking anyone else for permission. I nodded slowly. The road was still there, same as before. But it didn't feel the same. Nothing did. We didn't head back to my house. Mr. Halpern asked me to turn left instead of right when we reached the next intersection, and I didn't question it. The road curved toward the older part of town where buildings hadn't changed much in decades. Brick fronts, faded signs, places that didn't rush to keep up with anything. His office sat between a closed insurance agency and a barber shop that still had a striped pole out front. I had been there once before, years ago, when my grandfather first updated his will. I remembered the smell, paper leather, and something faintly like old wood. We walked in without speaking. The quiet inside felt different from the quiet in the car, less heavy, more deliberate. Mr. Halpern gestured for me to sit across from his desk. The same desk I remembered. Solid oak, scratches along the edges like it had seen a lot of conversations people didn't want to have. He placed the folder down in front of me but didn't open it right away. Before we go through this, he said, there are a few things you should understand about your grandfather. I gave a small nod. I thought I knew him. You knew him as a grandfather, he said gently. That's not the same as knowing how he moved through the world. I leaned back slightly in the chair. I wasn't sure I liked the sound of that, but I also wasn't sure I had the right to argue. He didn't trust easily, Mr. Halpern continued, but once he did, he didn't waver. That sounds like him, I said quietly. He trusted you, he said. Something about the way he said it made my throat tighten. My grandfather had never said things like that out loud, not in big, obvious ways. He didn't give speeches, didn't sit you down and explain how much you meant to him. But he showed it. When I was 10, he let me help him fix a fence that didn't need fixing. I held nails. He handed me tools I wasn't strong enough to use yet. He didn't rush me, didn't correct me unless it mattered. Take your time, he would say. Do it right once. I carried that with me longer than I realized. Even after I got married, even after I started letting other people decide what right looked like. 3 years ago, Mr. Halpern said bringing me back your grandfather came in and asked for a full review of his estate. I folded my hands together in my lap. That's around when Mark started pushing for us to reorganize things. Mr. Halpern raised an eyebrow slightly. Reorganize how? Joint accounts, I said, consolidating assets. He said it would make taxes easier, more efficient. And did it, he asked. I hesitated. I don't really know, I admitted. He handled most of it. That silence between us said more than any explanation I could have given. Your grandfather noticed the shift, Mr. Halpern said. Not from documents, from behavior. I frowned. He barely saw us together. He didn't need to, he replied. He watched you. That stopped me. What do you mean? He saw how you spoke less when your husband was around, he said. How you deferred, how you checked with him before answering simple questions. I felt a quiet flush of embarrassment even though there was no accusation in his tone. I thought that was just marriage, I said. Sometimes it is, he said. Sometimes it's something else. I looked down at my hands. There were small things I had ignored over the years. Mark correcting me in front of people but calling it helping. Mark insisting on handling the finances because you don't like numbers anyway. Mark deciding when we visited my family how long we stayed, what we contributed. None of it had felt big enough to fight over. But maybe that was the point. Your grandfather didn't believe in confrontation, Mr. Halpern said. He believed in preparation. I let out a slow breath, so he came to you. Yes. And told you my husband was going to throw me out one day, I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Not in those exact words, he said. But he believed there was a real possibility that you would be left in a position where you had no control over your own life. I leaned back again, staring at the ceiling for a moment. He never said anything to me, I murmured. He didn't want to create a conflict you weren't ready to see, Mr. Halpern replied. That landed harder than I expected. So instead I said slowly, he built something behind the scenes. Mr. Halpern nodded. Yes, a trust, structured in a way that protects you from external influence. External influence, I repeated. Anyone who might try to benefit from your position without your full understanding or consent, he clarified. That was a careful way of saying it. But I understood. He finally opened the folder. Inside were pages more than I expected, neatly organized, tabs marking sections, notes in the margins in my grandfather's handwriting. That was what got me. Not the legal language, not the numbers I hadn't seen yet. His handwriting. Small, precise, steady. He had gone through this himself. Line by line. For me. This trust holds the majority of his estate, Mr. Halpern explained. Land outside the city, several commercial properties, long-term investments, and a controlling share in a regional supply company. I blinked. A company. Yes, he said. One your grandfather never put his name on publicly. I let out a quiet, almost disbelieving breath. He used to complain about the price of lumber, I said. All the time. Mr. Halpern allowed himself a faint smile. He had a reason to pay attention. I turned a page carefully, like it might disappear if I moved too quickly. How much is all of this? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Enough, he said finally, that you will never have to depend on anyone else again. That wasn't a number. But it was something. And the condition, I asked. You said it doesn't all activate at once. He nodded and pointed to a section halfway through the document. Your grandfather included a clause, he said. A triggering condition. I read the heading. Contingency of loss of control. My stomach tightened. It states, Mr. Halpern continued, that full access to the trust is granted if you are placed in a situation where your primary resident's financial security or legal standing is compromised by a spouse or partner. I looked up at him slowly. That's very specific. Yes, he said. And today, I asked. He met my eyes. Today, he said, your husband informed you that you no longer have access to your home. I thought about the message again. Your things are in the trash. Go live with your mother. That counts, I asked quietly. Mr. Halpern didn't hesitate. Yes. The room felt very still. I looked back down at the document. All those years I had thought of my grandfather as a simple man. Careful, quiet, steady. I hadn't realized how far ahead he had been thinking. He didn't do this to punish your husband, Mr. Halpern said, as if reading my thoughts. He did it to protect you. I nodded slowly. I think I understand that now. And there's something else, he added. I looked up again. What? He closed the folder gently. This isn't just about money, he said. It's about control. I sat with that for a moment. For years I had told myself I was part of a partnership. That we made decisions together. That letting Mark handle certain things was just practical. But sitting there in that quiet office with my grandfather's handwriting in front of me, I could see it more clearly. I had been stepping back, little by little, until there wasn't much left that was mine to decide. What happens next? I asked. Mr. Halpern leaned back slightly in his chair. Next, he said, you decide whether you want to step into what your grandfather prepared for you. I looked at the folder. At the life I hadn't known I had. Then I thought about the house I wasn't sure I could go back to. About the message still sitting on my phone. About the man who had sent it. I think I said slowly, I don't have much of a choice anymore. Mr. Halpern shook his head once. You do, he said. That's the point. I let that settle. Choice. It had been a long time since that word felt real. I didn't go back to the house that day. Mr. Halpern suggested I take a room at the Willow Creek Inn, nothing fancy, just clean quiet and a place where nobody would ask questions, the kind of place people pass through without leaving much behind. It felt right. I parked under a maple tree that had already started to turn even though it was only early fall. The air carried that dry, familiar smell that comes just before the weather shifts. I sat in the car for a moment before going in looking at my phone again. The message was still there. No apology, no follow-up, no explanation. Just a decision made without me. I locked the car and walked inside. The room was simple. A bed, a chair, a small desk, and a window that looked out onto a parking lot and a row of trees beyond it. I set my bag down and sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time all day there was no one else around. No funeral guests, no passing trucks, no calm voice from the passenger seat explaining what my life had just become. Just me. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees and let the silence settle. Not heavy. Just honest. When I met Mark, he wasn't like this. That's the part people always forget when they hear stories like mine. They assume it was obvious from the beginning, that there were signs you ignored because you wanted to. But it didn't feel that way at the time. He was steady, confident, the kind of man who seemed to know what he was doing even when things got complicated. I had just started working at the accounting office downtown. I liked the work, but I wasn't sure where it would lead. Mark made things feel certain. He talked about plans, about building something together, about not having to worry all the time. That last part mattered more than I realized. We got married 2 years later. Nothing extravagant. A small ceremony. My grandfather stood beside me, quiet as always. He didn't say much that day, but I remember the way he looked at Mark. Not cold, not unkind. Just measuring. At the time, I told myself he was just being protective. Now I wasn't so sure. The first few years were easy. Or at least they felt that way. We both worked. We shared expenses. We talked about buying the house instead of renting. Mark handled most of the financial planning, but I didn't mind. Numbers never made me nervous, but they didn't excite me either. He said he enjoyed it. Let me take care of that, he would say. You've got enough on your plate. It sounded like support. I let it be that. The changes didn't happen all at once. They never do. It started with small things. Mark opening my mail by accident and then explaining what it was so I didn't have to look at it. Mark moving money between accounts without mentioning it until after. Mark sitting in on calls I could have handled on my own, then answering for me when I hesitated. Each time it felt like a convenience. Something that made life smoother. Something I didn't need to question. I stood up from the bed and walked over to the window. A car pulled into the lot. An older couple stepped out, moving slowly like they had all the time in the world. They spoke quietly to each other the way people do when they've been together long enough not to need many words. I wondered what that kind of certainty felt like. Not the kind Mark had offered. The real kind. He's just better at this than I am, I had told my friend Elaine once over coffee. Elaine had looked at me for a long moment. Better at what she asked. Handling things I said, money, decisions, all of it. She didn't argue. She just nodded slowly like she was filing something away. I didn't ask what. Back in the room, I picked up my phone again. Still no new messages. I didn't know if that made it better or worse. About 3 years ago, things shifted more noticeably. That was when Mark started talking about consolidating everything. We've got too many separate accounts, he said. It's inefficient. We're paying more in fees than we need to. It made sense on the surface. We met with a financial advisor, someone Mark knew from a previous project. The meeting went quickly. Too quickly now that I think about it. Most of the conversation happened between the two of them. I signed where they told me to sign. I asked a few questions, but they were answered in ways that didn't invite more. It's standard, Mark would say. It's just paperwork. I told myself I understood enough. I didn't. A week after that meeting, I noticed I couldn't access one of our accounts online. Temporary issue, Mark said. They're updating the system. I accepted that. A month later, I realized I didn't know exactly how much we had saved. Not because it was hidden, but because I hadn't looked. Because I had trusted him to handle it. Trust is a quiet thing. It doesn't announce itself when it starts to slip. It just becomes something you assume is still there. Until it isn't. I sat back down on the bed and looked around the room. There was nothing in it that belonged to me beyond what I had brought in my bag. A few clothes, a toothbrush, my wallet, my phone. 12 years of marriage, and that was what I had immediate access to. It wasn't anger that rose up in me. Not yet. It was something else. A kind of clarity. Mark hadn't thrown me out in a moment of anger. That message wasn't written in a rush. It was clean, final, controlled. Which meant he had been thinking about it. Planning it. Just like my grandfather had planned something of his own. The difference was my grandfather had planned to protect me. Mark had planned to remove me. I stood up again and walked over to the small desk. There was a notepad and a pen. I sat down and wrote one sentence. What do I actually control? I stared at it for a moment. Then I started listing things. My job. My name. The documents Mr. Halpern had shown me. The choices I hadn't been making. I stopped writing. For the first time all day I felt something steady underneath everything else. Not confidence. Not yet. But direction. There was a knock on the door. Not loud, just enough to be heard. I opened it. Mr. Halpern stood there still holding that same leather folder. I thought you might want to go over a few more details, he said. I stepped aside and let him in. Yes, I said. I think I do. Mr. Halpern didn't sit right away. He closed the door behind him, took a slow look around the room, and then placed the leather folder on the desk as if he were setting something down that needed respect. You've had some time to think, he said. I nodded, enough to know I don't want to guess anymore. That's a good place to start. He pulled the chair out and sat across from me. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he opened the folder again, turning it so the pages faced me. These are copies, he said. The originals are secured, but everything here is binding. I leaned forward. The paper looked ordinary. That was the unsettling part. Something that could change everything printed in a standard font on standard stock. Let's take it one step at a time, he said. He pointed to a section near the front. This is the trust instrument, he said. It names you as the sole beneficiary. I read the line twice just to be sure I wasn't missing anything. No co-beneficiaries, no shared control, just my name. It also names a trustee, he added. A neutral party, not me, not your husband. Who, I asked. A regional fiduciary firm, he said. They're required to act in your best interest and they answer to the terms your grandfather set, not to anyone else. I nodded slowly, so even if Mark tried to interfere? He couldn't, Mr. Halpern said, not legally. He turned another page. This section outlines the assets, he said. I skimmed the headings. Properties, holdings, accounts. The numbers were there, but I didn't focus on them yet. I focused on the structure. Your grandfather kept most of this outside of anything that could be considered marital property, he explained. Separate entities, separate titles, separate control. So it was never part of what Mark and I built together, I said. That's correct. A quiet, steady relief moved through me. Not excitement, not even gratitude yet. Just space. He tapped a tab further back. This is the clause we discussed, he said, the contingency. I read the title again. Contingency of loss of control. It didn't feel abstract anymore. Go ahead, he said, read it out loud. I hesitated, then did. In the event that the beneficiary is deprived of access to her primary resident's financial resources or legal agency due to the actions of a spouse or partner. My voice slowed. The trustee shall grant immediate and full operational control of the trust to the beneficiary without restriction. I looked up. That's very clear. It was meant to be, he said. I read it again more carefully. Without restriction. No waiting period, I asked. Number. No additional approvals. Number. And this applies now. He met my eyes. Yes. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. For years, decisions had come with layers, conversations, explanations, permission. Now, for the first time, something was simply mine. No negotiation. No discussion. There's one more thing, Mr. Halpern said. He reached into the folder and pulled out a separate document. This is a record of all transfers and authorizations connected to your joint accounts over the past 3 years. I felt my stomach tighten. Why would I need that? Because he said calmly it shows a pattern. He slid it toward me. I looked down. Dates, amounts, notes. At first it was just numbers. Then I started to see it. Large withdrawals I didn't remember discussing. Transfers between accounts I didn't know existed. Payments to entities I didn't recognize. Is this all from our accounts? I asked. Yes. All authorized by Mark. Yes. And I didn't sign any of these? He shook his head. Number. I felt something shift again. Not confusion this time. Recognition. There are also documents here, he said, pulling another set of papers forward that show attempted changes. I looked at him. What kind of changes? Attempts to add additional authorized signatories. Attempts to restructure ownership on certain assets. I leaned forward. Were any of them successful? No, he said. They required your signature. I stared at the page. I don't remember seeing any of this. You wouldn't, he said. They were never completed. I sat back slowly. So he tried, I said. Yes. And when he couldn't? I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. Your things are in the trash. Go live with your mother. He needed you out of the way, Mr. Halpern said quietly. Or at least he believed he did. I nodded once. That made more sense than anything else had. I closed the document and rested my hands on it. For a long time I had told myself that whatever was happening in my marriage was manageable, that it was temporary, that if I just stayed steady, things would settle. But this wasn't something that had happened overnight. It had been building. Quietly. Carefully. Just like everything my grandfather had done. Only in the opposite direction. What are my options? I asked. Mr. Halpern didn't rush. You have several, he said. But the first decision is simple. He leaned forward slightly. Do you want to go back to that house tonight? I thought about it. About the kitchen. The living room. The bedroom that no longer felt like it belonged to me. No, I said. The answer came easier than I expected. Then we proceed accordingly, he said. How? I asked. First, we notify the trustee that the contingency has been triggered, he said. That will begin the formal transfer of operational control to you. And how long does that take? Hours, he said, not days. I nodded. What else? We secure your immediate needs, he continued. Housing, access to funds, documentation. I have some savings, I said. He gave a small, knowing look. You have more than that now, he said, but we'll do this properly. He made a few notes, then looked back up. Second, he said, we document everything that has happened today. The message, I asked. Yes, and any other communication. I picked up my phone and handed it to him. He took a photo of the screen, then handed it back. That's enough, I asked. For now, he said. We're not building a case yet. We're establishing a record. A record? It sounded formal. Controlled. The opposite of how the day had started. And Mark, I asked. What about him? I hesitated. I don't know what he expects me to do. Mr. Halpern considered that. He expects you to react, he said. To come back, to argue, to negotiate. I nodded slowly. That sounds right. He closed the folder. You don't have to do any of that, he said. I sat with that for a moment. All day I had been moving from one reaction to the next. Shock, confusion, understanding. Now for the first time there was a pause. A space where I didn't have to respond immediately. What if I don't go back at all, I asked. Then you don't, he said simply. The answer was so straightforward it almost felt unfamiliar. I stood up and walked back to the window. The parking lot lights had come on. The sky was darker now, the trees outside just shapes against it. This morning I had left home thinking I was returning to the same life. Now that life felt distant. Not gone. But no longer something I needed to step back into. I think I said slowly, I need to see him. Mr. Halpern didn't react immediately. Not to argue, I added, just to understand what he thinks he's done. He nodded once. That's your decision, he said, but you don't go alone. I turned back to him. I won't, I said. And for the first time I meant it in a way I hadn't before. I didn't go back that night. Mr. Halpern arranged for me to stay another day at the inn, and by morning things had already begun to shift. Not in a dramatic way, Nothing loud or sudden, just quiet confirmations. A call from the fiduciary firm. A secure email with access instructions. A temporary account set up in my name. It all felt procedural, steady, real. By noon, I could see the structure of something I hadn't had in years: clear ownership, clear access, clear decisions. Mine. I'd like to go back today, I told Mr. Halpern when he called to check in. There was a brief pause on the other end. To the house, he asked. Yes. Are you certain? I am. Another pause, not hesitation, just consideration. Then I'll meet you there, he said. Give me an hour. The drive felt shorter than it had the day before. Same road, same landmarks. But I wasn't looking at them the same way. I wasn't trying to hold on to anything. I was just moving forward. The house came into view as I turned onto our street. It looked exactly the same. White siding. The porch Mark had insisted on repainting last spring. The front yard we never quite finished landscaping. If you didn't know what had happened, nothing about it would seem different. But as I pulled into the driveway, I saw them. 2 black trash bags near the curb. One of them had split open slightly. A sweater I recognized mine hung halfway out, caught on the edge. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment. No anger. No shock. Just confirmation. Mr. Halpern's car pulled in behind me a minute later. He stepped out, closing the door with that same careful motion he always used. You don't have to do this today, he said as he walked up beside me. I know, I replied, but I'm going to. He nodded once. Then I'm right here. I got out of the car. The air felt cooler than it had the day before. Or maybe I just noticed it more. I walked past the trash bags without stopping and went up the front steps. The door was locked. Of course it was. I knocked. Not hard, just enough. Footsteps inside. Then the door opened. Mark stood there looking exactly like he always did. Pressed shirt, clean lines, no sign of the decision he had made the day before. For a second he didn't speak. Then his eyes shifted slightly, taking in Mr. Halpern behind me. What is this, he asked. His tone wasn't angry. Just annoyed. I came to get my things, I said. He glanced past me again. You brought a lawyer. He's not my lawyer, I said. He's here to witness. Mark gave a small dismissive breath. That's unnecessary. Maybe, I said, but he's staying. There was a moment where he considered pushing back. Then he stepped aside. Fine, he said, make it quick. I walked inside. The house smelled the same. Coffee, wood polish, something faintly citrus from the cleaner we used on the counters. Everything was in place. Except what wasn't. Your things are out front, Mark said from behind me. I saw that, I replied. Then I don't understand why you're here. I turned to face him. Because not everything I own fits in a trash bag. He didn't answer that. I moved through the house slowly. Not searching. Not rushing. Just looking. The living room, the kitchen, the hallway. 12 years of routine laid out exactly the way it had always been. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. In the bedroom, the closet door was open. Half of it empty. The rest his side untouched. Neat, organized. Intact. I walked to the dresser and opened the top drawer. Jewelry, documents, a few personal things I hadn't seen in months. I picked up a small box my grandfather had given me years ago. Inside was a watch. Simple, durable, not expensive. Time matters, he had said when he gave it to me, not in the way people think. I slipped it into my bag. Mark leaned against the doorframe. You're making this more complicated than it needs to be, he said. I didn't look up. I don't think I am. He crossed his arms. Look, this isn't working, he said. It hasn't been for a while. I know, I said. That seemed to catch him off guard. I've been carrying everything, he continued. The finances, the decisions. You've been controlling everything, I said, still calm. He let out a short laugh. Same thing. I closed the drawer and stood up. No, I said, it's not. We stood there for a moment. No raised voices. No sudden movement. Just 2 people looking at something that had already ended. You should have talked to me, he said finally. I tried, I replied. You answered for both of us. That landed. Not hard. Just enough. He shifted his weight. So what now, he asked. I met his eyes. Now, I said, we figure out what this looks like without pretending it's still something it's not. He frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means I'm not moving back in, I said, and I'm not negotiating from the position you think I am. His expression changed then. Not completely. But enough. What position is that, he asked. I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of the trust summary Mr. Halpern had given me that morning. I held it out. You should read this, I said. He didn't take it right away. What is it? Information, I said. After a moment, he took the paper. His eyes moved across the page. Slowly at first. Then faster. I watched the shift happen. Subtle. But real. What is this? He asked again, quieter this time. My grandfather's estate, I said, and my role in it. He looked back at the paper. Then at me. You're serious? Yes. He read a few more lines. His jaw tightened slightly. This doesn't change anything, he said, though there was less certainty in his voice now. It changes a few things, I replied. Like what? I held his gaze. Like the fact that I'm not the one who just lost everything. The room went still. He looked down at the paper again. Then back at me. For the first time since I'd walked in, he didn't have an immediate response. I didn't press. I didn't explain. I didn't argue. I just turned, picked up my bag, and walked past him. At the front door, I paused long enough to say one thing. I'll be in touch, I said. Not as a threat. Not as a promise. Just as a statement. Then I stepped outside. The trash bags were still there. I picked up the one with the sweater and set it in the back of my car. Not because I needed it, but because it was mine. Mr. Halpern stood by his car watching quietly. You okay? He asked. I looked back at the house one last time. Then I nodded. Yes, I said. I think I am. I didn't hear from Mark that night. Not a call, not a message, nothing. If this had happened a year earlier, the silence would have unsettled me. I would have wondered what he was thinking, what he was planning, whether I had said something wrong or pushed too far. But that night the silence felt different. It wasn't something I needed to fill. The next morning I sat at the small desk in the in-room with a cup of coffee I hadn't touched yet. The documents were spread out in front of me. Not all of them, just enough to understand the structure. Names of entities I didn't recognize, properties listed by parcel number, investment accounts managed through firms I had never heard of. And my name? Attached to all of it. Not beside someone else's. Not underneath. Mine. There was a knock on the door just after 9. Mr. Halpern stepped in, as steady as always, carrying a thinner folder this time. Morning, he said. Morning. He glanced at the papers on the desk. Getting familiar. Trying to, I said. He set the folder down. That's enough for now, he said. You don't need to understand everything at once. I nodded. What's in that one? Next steps, he said. We sat across from each other again. Different room, same quiet. Have you heard from him? He asked. Number. He didn't seem surprised. That won't last, he said. I know. He opened the folder. There are 2 paths in front of you, he said. Neither of them requires urgency. I listened. First, he continued, you can move forward with separation, formal, documented, clean. And the second, you can wait, he said. See how he responds. Let him define his position more clearly. I considered that. What would you recommend? I asked. He paused. I don't make recommendations in matters like this, he said. I explain consequences, then explain them. If you move forward now, he said, you establish control immediately. You define the terms. You protect what is yours before anything else can be attempted. And if I wait? You give him time, he said. Time to adjust, to react, to possibly try to regain leverage. I nodded slowly. So waiting benefits him. In most cases, he said yes. I leaned back in the chair. For years, I had been the one waiting. Waiting for Mark to explain things. Waiting for the right time to bring something up. Waiting for things to settle. I didn't feel like waiting anymore. I want to move forward, I said. Mr. Halpern gave a small nod. Then we'll begin the process today. He slid a document toward me. Initial notice, he said. This formally records the change in your circumstances and your intent to separate financial and legal interests. I read through it carefully. No rush. No pressure. Just information. For once I understood what I was signing. Do I need to contact him? I asked. Not directly, he said. He will be notified. I nodded. That felt right. I signed the document. The pen moved steadily across the page. No hesitation. No second guessing. "There's something else you should be aware of," Mr. Halpern said, closing the folder. I looked up. "What?" "Your grandfather left a letter," he said. "Not part of the legal documents, personal." I felt something shift again. It's dated the same week he revised the trust," he said. "He asked that you receive it only if the contingency was triggered." I sat still for a moment. "Do you have it?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a single envelope. Cream-colored, my name written on the front in that same steady handwriting. I took it carefully. It felt lighter than I expected, but heavier somehow too. "You can read it now," he said, "or later." I nodded. "Later," I said. He didn't push. After he left, I sat there with the envelope in my hands. For a long time, I didn't open it. I just looked at my name, the way he had written it. Clear, certain. When I finally did open it, the paper inside was folded neatly. I unfolded it slowly. "If you're reading this, it means something I hoped wouldn't happen has happened. It means you've been put in a position where you feel like you've lost control. I'm sorry for that." I paused. Not because I didn't want to keep reading, but because he had been right. "You won't like how I handled this. I know that. I didn't tell you everything. I didn't warn you the way you might think I should have. But I also know you, and I know that some things have to be seen, not explained." I let out a slow breath. "You are not someone who needs to be saved. You are someone who needs to remember that you can stand on your own. If you're reading this, then you're already there. You just don't know it yet." My hands were steady now. "Don't use what I've left you to prove anything to anyone. Not to him, not to anyone else. Use it to build something that belongs to you." I looked out the window. The same parking lot, the same trees. But they didn't feel like the whole picture anymore. And if you can in time, don't carry anger longer than it serves you. It weighs more than anything I could ever leave behind. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Then I set it on the desk in front of me. For years I had thought strength looked a certain way. Loud, certain, unyielding. But sitting there in that quiet room, I understood something different. Strength could be quiet. It could be patient. It could wait until the moment it was needed and then simply exist. Mark didn't understand that. He thought control came from holding everything tightly. From managing, directing, deciding. He didn't see that what he had been holding wasn't strength. It was dependence. And the moment I stepped out of it, there was nothing left for him to hold on to. I picked up my phone. Still no messages. Still no calls. That was fine. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to happen. Something already had. The papers moved forward without much noise. That was the part that surprised me the most. No shouting, no scenes, no long drawn-out arguments like the ones you see on television, just documents, notices, signatures, and a series of decisions that didn't require anyone to raise their voice. Within a week I had a place to stay that wasn't temporary. It wasn't large, not impressive. A small house on the edge of town, close enough to the grocery store and the pharmacy, far enough that evenings stayed quiet. The kind of place you could grow into without needing to explain why you chose it. It was mine. Not because of the size or the price, because I chose it. I kept my job. That was another decision people didn't expect. "You don't have to," Elaine told me when we met for coffee again. "I know," I said. "Then why would you?" I thought about that for a moment before answering. "Because I want to," I said. She studied me for a second, then smiled. "All right," she said, "that makes sense." The trust settled into the background of my life. It didn't disappear. It just stopped being the center of everything. There were meetings, conversations, decisions I had to make about things I hadn't managed before. At first it felt like learning a new language. But I took my grandfather's advice even if he had never said it directly in this context. Take your time. Do it right once. I didn't rush into anything. I didn't try to prove anything either. Not to Mark. Not to the people who suddenly looked at me differently when they realized what had changed. I paid attention. I asked questions, and when I didn't understand something, I said so. That alone felt like a shift. Mark reached out after the second week. A short message. "We need to talk." I looked at it for a while before responding. "We will, through the attorneys. No anger. No explanation. Just a boundary. The process of separating everything took time. Not because it was complicated, because it had to be done carefully. There were accounts to close, assets to divide, legal lines to draw where there had once been shared space. Mark didn't fight as much as I expected. At least not directly. There were attempts. Questions framed in a way that suggested confusion rather than intent. Are you sure this is necessary? Can't we handle this privately? But each time the answer stayed the same. This is how it will be handled. We saw each other once in person a month later. Not at the house. At a small office downtown with 2 attorneys present and a table that felt too wide for conversation. He looked the same. But something in the way he held himself had changed. Less certain. Less controlled. I didn't think you'd go this far, he said at one point. His voice wasn't sharp. Just quieter than I remembered. I didn't think I had to, I replied. He nodded like that made sense, or like he didn't have a better answer. I wasn't trying to hurt you, he said after a moment. I believed that. Not because it excused anything. Because it explained it. You were trying to protect yourself, I said. He didn't argue. There wasn't much else to say after that. Not because there weren't things left unsaid. Because they didn't need to be said anymore. The final papers were signed 2 months after everything started. No ceremony. No sense of victory. Just a quiet conclusion to something that had already ended long before. Life didn't become perfect after that. That's not how it works. There were still decisions to make, still moments where I wasn't sure I was doing the right thing. Still days where I missed the version of my life I thought I had. But those moments didn't last the way they used to. They passed. And I stayed. I started visiting my mother more often. Not because I had nowhere else to go. Because I wanted to. We sat at her kitchen table drinking coffee that was always a little too strong, talking about things we hadn't made time for in years. Small things. Real things. I also went back to the feed store. The same one I had pulled over near that day. It was still there. Same sign, same worn floors, same slow rhythm. I didn't need anything. I just walked through it. Looked at the shelves. Let myself remember. On the way out, I caught my reflection in the glass door. For a second, I didn't recognize what had changed. Then I did. It wasn't how I looked. It was how I stood. My grandfather had never tried to make me into something else. He had just made sure that when the time came, I would have the space to become who I already was. I kept his letter in the drawer by my bed. Not because I needed to read it often. Because I knew it was there. Sometimes in the evenings, I would sit on the small porch of my new house and watch the light fade. No rush. No noise. Just time moving the way it's supposed to. I used to think that losing everything would feel like the end. Like something you couldn't come back from. But I learned something different. Sometimes losing what was never truly yours is the only way to see what is. If you've ever found yourself in a place where everything feels like it's been taken from you, where the life you built doesn't look the way you thought it would, take a moment. Not to react. Not to fix it all at once. Just to see it clearly. Because sometimes the moment you think you've lost control is the moment you're finally being given it back. And if this story meant something to you, if it felt familiar in ways you didn't expect, I hope you'll take that quiet understanding and carry it with you. Maybe share it with someone who needs it. Maybe stay a little longer, listen to another story. Either way, I'm glad you were here.